There was once a man who lived in a village nestled between two mountains. He was known for his temper, a fire that burned so fiercely it seemed to consume everything in its path. His anger was legendary, a storm that could erupt without warning, leaving destruction in its wake. The villagers feared him, avoided him, and whispered about him in hushed tones. They called him the man who could not be calmed. But deep within him, beneath the layers of rage, there was a quiet ache, a longing for something he could not name. One day, as he walked through the forest, he came across an old monk sitting by a stream. The monk was still, so still that he seemed to blend into the landscape, as if he were part of the earth itself. The man, irritated by the monk's tranquility, approached him with a scowl. "Why do you sit here, doing nothing?" he demanded. The monk looked up, his eyes calm and unflinching. "I am listening," he replied. The man scoffed. "Listening to what? There is nothing here but silence." The monk smiled faintly. "Exactly." The man was about to unleash his anger, to tell the monk how foolish he sounded. But something in the monk's gaze stopped him. It was as if the monk could see through him, past the rage, past the walls he had built, and into the heart of his pain. The man sat down, reluctantly, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to be still. The silence was uncomfortable at first, like a weight pressing against his chest. But as the minutes passed, he began to notice things he had never noticed before: the gentle rustle of leaves, the soft murmur of the stream, the distant call of a bird. And then, slowly, he began to hear something else, the sound of his own thoughts. Loud and chaotic, like a storm raging inside him. The monk spoke again, his voice soft but firm. "Your anger is not your enemy. It is a messenger, trying to tell you something. But you must learn to listen." The man frowned. What could it possibly be trying to tell me? The monk leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "That you are afraid, that you are hurt, that you are lonely. Your anger is a shield, protecting you from the pain you do not wish to face. But until you lower that shield, you will never find peace." The man felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of anger and fear and something else he could not name. He wanted to argue, to deny the monk's words. But deep down, he knew they were true. He had been angry for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be anything else. He had built his life around his rage, using it to push people away, to protect himself from being hurt. But in doing so, he had also pushed away any chance of connection, of love, of understanding. For days, the man returned to the stream, sitting in silence with the monk. At first, it was unbearable. His mind raced with thoughts, his body restless with the need to move, to act, to do something. But gradually, he began to settle. He began to notice the patterns of his thoughts, the way his anger would rise and fall like a tide. He began to see how his reactions were automatic, how he would lash out without thinking, without understanding why. And as he watched, as he listened, something inside him began to shift. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the man turned to the monk and asked, "How do I let go of my anger? How do I stop it from controlling me?" The monk smiled. "You do not stop it. You cannot stop a river from flowing. But you can learn to navigate its currents. When anger arises, do not fight it, do not feed it, simply observe it, see it for what it is, a feeling, nothing more, and then, Let it pass." The man took a deep breath. Letting the monk's words sink in, he realized that his anger was not something to be conquered or destroyed. It was a part of him, but it did not define him. He could choose how to respond to it, how to channel it, how to let it go. And in that moment, he felt a sense of freedom he had never known before. As the days turned into weeks, the man began to change. He no longer erupted at the slightest provocation. He no longer carried the weight of his anger like a burden. Instead, he learned to pause, to breathe, to listen. He learned to see the world with new eyes, to approach life with curiosity rather than fear. And as he did, the villagers began to notice. They no longer whispered about him in fear. Instead, they greeted him with smiles, with kindness, with respect. One day, as he walked through the village, a child ran up to him, holding a small, crumpled flower. "For you," the child said, grinning. The man took the flower, his heart swelling with emotion. He realized that this moment of connection, of love, was what he had been longing for all along. It was not something he could find in anger or in isolation. It was something he had to create, to nurture, to allow. And so, the man who was once known as the man who could not be calmed became something else entirely. He became a man who listened, who understood, who loved. He became a man who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that true strength lies not in the ability to control others, but in the ability to control oneself. And in that control, in that understanding, he found peace.